Let's not try to reach China this time, eh, Betts?
Well, there's no sense digging if you don't go deep.
The last time we dug one together, you went so deep that when I climbed out in the morning...
For over 40 years, Richard Jaeckel was Hollywood's tough guy. If a movie needed grit, you called him. He was the man with a face that told a story before he ever said a line, the actor who stood next to John Wayne, Paul Newman, and Gregory Peck and never once looked out of place. Across more than 150 roles, he built a career as one of the most reliable character actors in the business, but his biggest fight wasn't on a movie set. It was a quiet, hidden struggle that cost him almost everything. He didn't go out in a blaze of glory like his on-screen characters. Instead, his final scene played out in the hushed halls of a retirement home for actors, an ending far more tragic than anyone knew. This is the story of a face everyone recognized, even if they couldn't quite place the name. It's the story of a devoted family man who spent his life playing killers and soldiers, and how the industry he gave his life to became his last refuge. The tragedy of Richard Jaeckel isn't just about how he died, it's about the fragility he hid behind a lifetime of toughness, and the heartbreaking truth that in the dream factory of Hollywood, the final act is often the hardest. Hollywood is a town people flock to with a dream. Richard Jaeckel got there with a mail cart. Born in Long Beach, New York, on October 10, 1926, he wasn't part of a Hollywood dynasty. His family moved to Los Angeles in 1934 for his father's fur business, not to push young Richard into show business. He even went to Hollywood High, living in the shadow of the studios, but a life in front of the camera was never the plan. After graduating, he took a job as a mail boy at 20th Century Fox Studios. It was a gig of routine and anonymity, pushing a cart through the corridors of a world he had no plans to join. But sometimes, all it takes is being in the right place at the right time. A casting director spotted the 17-year-old making his rounds and saw something in his face, a youthful toughness that was perfect for a part in the war film Guadalcanal Diary. Jaeckel was hesitant, but he took the role. In 1943, audiences first saw him as Private Chicken Anderson, a young Marine finding his courage in the middle of a war. He was a hit. He followed it up with another war movie, Wing and a Prayer, in 1944. But just as his accidental career was starting, real life called. From 1944 to 1949, Richard Jaeckel wasn't playing a serviceman, he was one, serving in the United States Navy. When he returned, Hollywood remembered him. He settled into the life of a working actor, his baby face and stocky build making him a natural for the tough, restless young men in post-war films. He played a delinquent in City Across the River and, in 1949, he put the uniform back on for two of the greatest war films ever made. Battleground and Sands of Iwo Jima, where he started a long friendship with John Wayne. This was also when he built his personal life. In 1947, at just 20 years old, he married Antoinette Marches. Their marriage would last for 50 years, a rare success story in the turbulent world of Hollywood. They had a son, Barry, and created a family life that was intentionally kept far away from the Hollywood party scene. While his characters were brawling and facing down enemy fire, the real Richard Jaeckel was building a foundation of normalcy. He was an actor by accident, but a family man by choice. The 1950s cemented Jaeckel's place in Hollywood. He wasn't a leading man or a matinee idol. He was something more durable, a character actor you could always count on. With his unique mix of boyish looks and a hardened edge, he became the face of rebellion and military grit. One of his most memorable early roles was in the 1950 classic The Gunfighter. He played Eddie, a cocky young punk trying to make a name for himself by outdrawing Gregory Peck's character, Jimmy Ringo. In the opening scene, Jaeckel provokes Ringo and is shot dead for his trouble, kicking off the film's tragic story. It was a small part, but it showed what he did best: create a believable, flawed character that pushed the story forward. He was so good at playing hot-headed guys who make bad decisions that he ended up dying in a lot of his movies, but he wasn't just a tough guy. In 1952's comeback, Little Sheba, he played Turk, a handsome college athlete who becomes an object of desire and jealousy. Starring opposite giants like Burt Lancaster and Shirley Booth, Jaeckel proved he could command the screen with a different kind of intensity. Throughout the decade, he was everywhere. He was a soldier in the brutal war film Attack, a conflicted outlaw in the classic Western 3:10 to Yuma, and a soldier again in The Naked and the Dead. He worked with the biggest names in the business, Glenn Ford, Van Heflin, and even Elvis Presley in Flaming Star. Directors loved him because he was reliable. They knew if they cast Jaeckel, he'd show up, know his lines, and give a performance that felt real. He understood the tough guy archetype, but he always found a flicker of humanity inside it. His television career also took off. He was a frequent guest on shows like Bonanza, Gunsmoke, and Perry Mason. For an actor without a big studio contract, TV offered steady work between films. It was the hustle of a character actor. While the stars picked their projects, guys like Jaeckel were always working, building a career one role, one guest spot at a time. By the 1960s, he was a respected fixture in the industry. He was the face you knew, whose presence brought instant authenticity to any movie or show he was in. For nearly 30 years, Richard Jaeckel worked in the Hollywood trenches. He was a soldier, a cowboy, a killer, a face in the background of movie history. He was always good, always respected, but always a supporting player. Then, in 1971, a role came along that changed everything. It wouldn't make him a superstar, but it would give him something he'd never had. The industry's highest honor. The film was sometimes a great notion, based on Ken Kesey's novel about a stubborn family of Oregon loggers. The story goes that Paul Newman, the film's star and director, ran into Jaeckel on a Malibu beach and offered him the part of Joe Ben Stamper, the easygoing cousin of the intense Stamper brothers. It was another supporting role, but this one was special. Joe Ben was the heart of the family, a buoyant, tragic soul whose fate highlights the film's themes of pride and loss. Jaeckel's performance was incredible. He gave Joe Ben a warmth and humor that was instantly lovable. In a film with heavyweights like Newman and Henry Fonda, Jaeckel didn't just keep up, he stood out. His performance leads to one of the most unforgettable scenes of 70s cinema. Trapped under a log in a rising river, his character's good-natured humor slowly turns to terror, and then to a heartbreaking acceptance. It's an incredibly powerful scene, anchored entirely by Jaeckel. When the Academy Award nominations were announced in 1972, there was Richard Jaeckel's name, nominated for Best Supporting Actor. After 28 years in the business, the mailboy-turned-actor was finally being recognized. For a character actor, a nomination is more than an award, it's validation for a lifetime of small parts and thankless roles. He lost the Oscar to Ben Johnson for The Last Picture Show, another veteran character actor having his moment. But the nomination itself was the win. For a while, he was riding a wave of critical acclaim, his name now preceded by the title Oscar nominee. He re-teamed with director Robert Aldrich for the Western Ulzana's Raid and appeared in Sam Peckinpah's Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. But Hollywood momentum is a funny thing. The nomination didn't lead to starring roles. He was still a supporting actor, just a more respected one. The industry had typecast him, and an Oscar nod couldn't change that. Still, the nomination remains the peak of his professional career, a moment when the spotlight finally found the man who had spent his life working just outside its beam. While Hollywood knew Richard Jaeckel as the ultimate tough guy, the public rarely saw the man behind the persona. Away from the movie set, Jaeckel lived a life defined by family, loyalty, and a deep love for the Southern California lifestyle. The center of his world was his marriage to Antoinette Marches. Their 50-year union was a rock of stability in a town famous for fleeting romances. Together, they raised their son, Barry, in a home shielded from Hollywood's chaos. By all accounts, Jaeckel was a devoted family man who had no interest in the glitzy party scene. He was immensely proud when his son, Barry Jaeckel, became a professional golfer on the PGA Tour. Richard himself was a natural athlete and an avid sportsman. Though he played cowboys and soldiers, his real passion was the ocean. He was a lifelong surfer who felt most at home on the waves of the California coast. This love for the outdoors kept him grounded. He was also deeply involved in his community. For many years, Richard Jaeckel was a popular Little League coach in West Los Angeles. It's a wonderful image, the man who played some of cinema's most fearsome characters patiently teaching kids how to hit a baseball. It showed who he really was, not just playing a part in his community, but being an active part of it. His friendships were telling, too. He was close with John Wayne and formed a lasting bond with the famously intense actor Robert Blake. He was well liked by his colleagues, not just for his professionalism, but for his warm, down-to-earth personality. This private side of Jaeckel is key to understanding the whole man. The on-screen persona was a craft he had mastered. But the real man was a husband of 50 years, a proud father, a surfer, and a baseball coach. He found his greatest joy in the quiet rhythms of a normal life. This stark contrast between his public image and private reality is what makes the final chapter of his story so heartbreaking. The man who had built such a strong, stable world for himself would see it all dismantled by forces he couldn't control. We think of Hollywood actors as being wealthy and secure, but for most character actors like Richard Jaeckel, life is much more uncertain. It's a constant hustle, moving from job to job, hoping the next one comes along. This unseen struggle set the stage for the hardships that would define Jaeckel's final years. Despite a career with over 150 credits, Jaeckel's income came from supporting roles. In Hollywood, the pay gap between a leading man and a character actor is massive. Character actors are usually paid a flat fee. They're skilled freelancers, and when the job is done, the paycheck stops. Residuals, payments for reruns, help, but they are often minimal for smaller parts and shrink over time. Jaeckel worked tirelessly, taking roles in everything from Oscar-nominated films to B-movies just to keep the paychecks coming. He was a working man in a business of superstars. He had a comfortable life, but not the kind of deep financial cushion that protects the truly famous from disaster. Then, the storm broke. In 1995, the man who had faced down countless screen villains faced an enemy he couldn't beat: debt. He was forced to declare bankruptcy. The consequences were devastating. Richard Jaeckel, the veteran of over 150 productions, lost his home in the affluent Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles. He lost nearly everything he owned. The security he had spent a lifetime building was gone. Adding to this financial devastation was a private heartbreak. His beloved wife of nearly 5 decades, Antoinette, was battling Alzheimer's disease. The foundations of his life, his home and his family, were cracking under an unbearable weight. The storm had arrived, and it was far more brutal than any battle he had ever fought on screen. The tough guy was vulnerable, his quiet life destroyed by the harsh realities of money and illness, a struggle that was almost entirely hidden from public view. Richard Jaeckel died on screen more times than he could count, but his real-life final battle was cruelly different. There was no dramatic last stand, no heroic sacrifice. His end was a slow, quiet, and profoundly sad retreat, fought in the sterile hallways of a hospital. Shortly after the bankruptcy, Jaeckel was diagnosed with melanoma, an aggressive skin cancer. For a man who had spent his life under the California sun, surfing the waves he loved, the diagnosis was a painful irony. He would fight it for 3 long years. Despite his failing health and financial ruin, he kept working. He had a recurring role as Lieutenant Ben Edwards on the hit series Baywatch. In his final appearances, the toll of his illness was visible. The stocky, vital man was gone, replaced by a frail figure who often needed a cane to walk. But he kept going. Acting was all he knew, and maybe the routine of the set was one last anchor to the life he was losing. As the cancer spread to his bones, it became clear he could no longer care for himself, nor could he afford private care with his wife also needing significant support. In a final, heartbreaking turn, Richard Jaeckel moved into the Motion Picture and Television Hospital in Woodland Hills, California. This facility was created as a safety net for industry workers who had fallen on hard times. The man who had shared the screen with Hollywood's biggest stars was now a resident in a retirement home for actors, a stark symbol of how far he had fallen. He was a private man, and he became even more so at the end. He hated what the illness had done to him. He reportedly waved off most visitors, wanting to be remembered as the strong man from the movies, not the frail patient he had become. "I know people are pulling for me to beat this," he was quoted as saying, "but let them have a glass at the bar for me and let it go at that." On June 14, 1997, at the age of 70, Richard Jaeckel's final battle ended. He passed away in the hospital, far from the spotlight. His wife, Antoinette, for whom he had cared as long as he could, outlived him. His ashes were scattered at sea, a final return to the ocean he loved. The tragedy of Richard Jaeckel isn't just that he died of cancer. It's the compounding sorrow of his last years, the humiliation of bankruptcy, the loss of his home, and the quiet indignity of spending his last days in a charitable facility while his wife battled her own illness. The tough guy's greatest fight was one he fought alone, and in the end, it was a battle he could not win. Richard Jaeckel's career was filled with dozens of memorable roles, from his Oscar-nominated turn in Sometimes a Great Notion to his role in The Dirty Dozen. What is your favorite Richard Jaeckel performance? Share your memories of this incredible character actor in the comments below. And if you think these forgotten stories of Hollywood deserve to be told, please like. Cocky Gunslinger, the loyal friend. He's part of the fabric of American movies, a face so familiar it feels like we knew him. But the story of his final years reveals a man we never knew at all, a man struggling with illness, financial ruin, and profound personal loss, all hidden behind a wall of quiet pride. His story is a powerful reminder that a long career in Hollywood doesn't always lead to a secure life, and that on-screen toughness is no defense against the real-world battles of disease and debt. He was a journeyman player, a term that perfectly captures his skill and his status. He traveled through war films, westerns, and dramas, a reliable and essential actor who never quite reached the destination of superstardom. The tragedy of Richard Jaeckel is indeed sadder than we thought because it speaks to a universal fear, of being forgotten, of losing everything you worked for. He gave 50 years of his life to an industry that, in the end, could only offer him a final, quiet place to rest. But his work lives on. In every gritty performance and every flash of defiance in his eyes, Richard Jaeckel remains the consummate character actor, an indispensable part of Hollywood history. And the best tribute we can pay him is to remember not just the tough guy on the screen, but the resilient, proud, and ultimately tragic man who fought his last battle in silence.